Fritz?
Here.
Fish?
Here.
Salzman?
Here.
Wheeler?
Here. Good morning.
Good morning and welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with Council Clerk's Office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you are in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Disruptive conduct such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping keep your Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Thank you. And Sue, I understand the first 4 individuals for communications would like to come up together. Is that correct?
Correct.
Very good.
Item 1067, request of Donna Cohen to address council regarding continued delays and broken promises in implementing the St. John's Truck Strategy Phase 2. And you can all come up, please. Item 1068, request of Ruth Wellen-Dix to address council regarding the St. John's Truck Strategy Phase 2 plan. 1069, request of Barbara Quinn to address council regarding the St. John's Truck Strategy plan, and also request of Rachel Hill to address the same.
You can just pull up another chair.
And it's my understanding, Sue, that with prior agreement, Donna Cohen has swapped with somebody else. Is that correct?
That's me.
Yes.
Oh, very good.
Yeah,
Thank
hi.
you. Thank you. All right. In any order that you would like, 3 minutes each. Name for the record, please.
Well, since everyone's looking at me, my name is Barbara Quinn. I worked on the St. John's Truck Strategy Phase 2 and also Phase 1. And I also worked on the St. John's Plan 2002 to 2004. I did miss out on the original St. John's Truck Strategy 2001. And I would like to say a thank you to the city. We did I really appreciate that the city decided to work with St. John's community on Truck Strategy not Phase 1, but 2001. That was a long time issue, has been a long time issue, was discussed between the community and the city, probably starting in the 80s and definitely in the 90s, and some of you may even remember some of that, possibly. It's been something like 30 years from the community perspective. And I'd just like to point out that since the St. John's Truck Strategy 2001, it's been about 20 years. That's a long time, and one of the main priorities we had back then even was North Fessenden. North Fessenden has been used as a de facto truck route for years. And in fact, at the time of Phase 2 negotiations, there were about 500 trucks per day using the route, and about 0.5% of those were making local deliveries. So 3 to 4 trucks per day were making local deliveries. The rest were cutting through. So I'd just like to say that I'm acting as sort of a continuity person here, since I was aware of the very first negotiations and what that was. And I'm disappointed that what's happening in Phase 2 as far as the delays is exactly what happened in Phase 1 as well. And I hope that with the latest developments, we're going to see some actual construction on the ground. But I'm not going to believe things are going to happen until I see that construction on the ground, because we have seen a series of promises from PBOT that really haven't really fleshed out. So My hope is that in coming here today, I just want to assure you that we have a lot of people in St. John's, activists who have been active for many years, and we do have a sense of continuity in the neighborhood, and we're going to remember things. So we'll hopefully keep that up as this construction progresses and in the future. And we'd really like to see it get started. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Francesca Barini, and Donna was nice enough to let me just come and talk to you for a few minutes. I've been following this truck strategy for probably since 2012 was when I found out about the strategy, when they were doing their initial study, and they came to the neighborhood and they talked to us, they showed us some graphs, and we were like, fantastic, we're gonna get something done. And I have a lot of patience for the mechanics of government, and things take time to build. I'm a maker, that's my trade. But traffic's getting worse there. I'm a runner, and it's very hard for me to run across the street at the corner at which I live. I live on Pier Park Place, and that's where Vicentin and St. Louis meet. And a part of the truck strategy was that you were going to put 2 crosswalks there. And I watch people from the apartments with strollers. There's a bus stop across the street. It's the only place within like a half mile on either way you can cross the street to get to the bus stop, and you have to run through heavy traffic. They keep telling us they're going to build it. I mean, here's something. Portland has a lot of issues that are really, really difficult to work on, that have solutions that you're still debating. Here's something that they've come and studied. There's supposedly the money for it. Everybody wants it. We're all on the same side. Why don't we just start making it now, 2018, when they said it was going to start? That's my main point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Ruth Llewellyn-Dix, and I'm a concerned St. John's resident. I'm a 76-year-old resident who lives 1 block south of Fessenden. I travel across Fessenden on Charleston Avenue to work at my plot in Pier Community Garden several times per week. At first, I would walk the route, but because the traffic is so fast and heavy, I have resorted to driving. Even driving is problematic, so I turn right, then turn left instead of driving straight across. I think I speak for other seniors in my neighborhood, as well as parents and children who cross this corridor daily. Before moving to St. John's 3 years ago, I worked at the St. John's Community Center, where I met residents who are here today and have been working on this issue for close to 20 years. Today, I want to urge you to make good on the promise to complete this life-saving project by 2019. By completing the planned strategy changes, we can better achieve Vision Zero. Please, no more delays. After all, I'm not getting any younger, and I wish to enjoy my trips to Pier Garden, especially with my grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor and Councilors. My name is Rachel Hill. There are 3 corridors affected by the St. John's Truck Strategy: Columbia Way, the St. Louis-Fessenden corridor, and North Lombard between St. Louis and Bruce. The reason I come today is to stand together with these advocates across St. John's, demanding that the truck strategy improvements that have been promised and delayed numerous times be implemented without delay. We're heartened to see that PBOT received the go-ahead for the project, and we urge you to assure that it occurs as promised and on time. But I also come to advocate for residents on and near Lombard, the designated truck route, whose story is part of this bigger one and also has its unique struggles. Namely, we have the impact of massive amounts of trucks that are on a primarily residential street. Since truck traffic has been fully diverted onto Lombard, safety and livability have taken a nosedive. Constant freight noise, diesel pollution, and frightening pedestrian experiences are negatively impacting our community. Accidents have increased, especially on the S-curve at St. John's and Jersey Streets. In images I provided you, you can see a detached trailer that fell off of a semi and narrowly missed hitting William Travis, the owner of Dub's Barbecue, as he was removing his sandwich sign. Dub wrote me yesterday to say that this was, quote, an almost very tragic accident for him. This section of Lombard, St. Louis to Bruce includes crossings for Sitton Elementary School, Pier Park, the 40-mile bike loop, and a public pool. It has 80 single-family residences, 5 apartment complexes, and 6 businesses. It represents a wide cross-section of stakeholders and tends to be a place where renters and lower-income residents live. The 44 and 75 bus routes reach the farthest parts of our city and neighborhood and service the port. It's a place for people, not just trucks. Much has changed since the design development in 2013. All trucks are now on Lombard. When PBOT came to talk to us about design engineering in 2017, we engaged fully and made important improvements to the design, including speed reader boards around the S-curve, more trees and crosswalks, and a better outreach process with mail notification and an evaluation. Community evaluation from lived experience is an important metric going beyond traffic engineering. We've agreed to make, they have agreed, PBOT has agreed to make the revisions that the community feels, if the community feels safety is not adequate, and these promises are in a letter that was signed by Interim Director Chris Warren. We also feel the city must continue to work on a better, longer-term solution. Traffic on Lombard is increasing. The new Amazon shipping facility will have 1,000 new parking spaces and truck traffic. As hosts to the truck route, St. John's and Lombard are carrying a heavy traffic burden, not just for the neighborhood, but for the city overall. We need a freight strategy that looks at community health and economic viability together and gets massive volumes of trucks off of our streets. The community members on Lombard want to see the improved safety of all 3 corridors. I'm here to join my neighbors in requesting that the construction of this important and long-delayed project be expedited as soon as possible. I've included a document with other neighbors' testimony. We want to have a strong relationship with the city, with accountability and the ability for residents to have feedback and impact on the solutions that affect them. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your being here. Commissioner Daly, did you have a comment?
I could give a quick update, but I think one of you may have already mentioned that this, we're expecting to have the low bid contractor on October 23rd, and construction is slated for January 2019.
It's very skeptical still.
Well, I'm not so skeptical. I am the new commissioner in charge of PBOT. It's only been a month, but I've got a lot of information here that we don't have time for me to share with you right now. But of course, there's always potential for other delays. That really depends on the contractor, if they're good to go in January. But it really does look like things are proceeding as of January.
That's good news.
One last thing, it is the darkest time of the year, and we've already had deaths on our street. Like, people have literally been killed crossing the street. There's very little lighting in a lot of those places, and just, I mean, somebody might die again. That's very strong possibility.
You've made a good case, and you've made a good case for the urgency, and I'm encouraged by what Commissioner Daly says, and I appreciate her taking up the mantle as our new Transportation Commissioner, and I'm sure you will continue to hold this council accountable. I'm not as well versed on all the details of the Phase 2 strategy, but if I'm hearing what's being said, it sounds like the request that you're making is being acted upon, and Commissioner Daly is pushing that forward. So it looks like we have, at least to my ear, a resolution here in the making. Thank you for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next individual, please.
Item 1071, request of Ida Pingala to address council regarding creative ideas and potential solutions for citizens of Portland and all counties.
Good morning. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Well, good morning, people. I hope you're all doing well. The first thing that I would like to address is the condition of the shelters, the so-called shelters meant to keep people safe and out of the elements. First of all, they're in deplorable condition, and on a daily basis, people's human rights are getting violated, and also people are literally put out to die without a blanket at night. They may be disabled, and everybody that I've ever met, seen, or know of that has been in any shelter at all that's already disabled, their condition degrades, and frequently they end up in the hospital. Enough said about that. The thing is they're inhumane, the shelters, and they don't work. They keep people in this place of being non-functional as they might already be, or it exacerbates conditions that are already there, whether it be mental, physical, or not. We're not able to get out. We are only allowed 2 bus tickets a month to go out and find housing, or to get medical help, or to get our medications, or any such thing. 2 bus tickets a month does not find a person a job, nor does it help find a person a place to live. Okay, that being said, housing. There needs to be some very immediate and very serious things done about the housing situation in Portland and in Oregon. There are people that are being even more marginalized and even more stigmatized because they are not housed. And it makes it even more difficult for these people to get jobs, to hold jobs. It's almost impossible to hold a job while a person's staying in a shelter or camping or living on the street. The thing is that I think that it is not beyond all of our intellects and our powers and the money that is available to get very creative about this, okay? There's not just, we don't all of us want condominiums or neat condominiums. I don't really care if it's a lean-to or a teepee or the small houses or anything, but there's space out there, and there's plenty of apartments and houses and basements that could be rented out, and it's not like all homeless people have no income. Most of us out there do have an income, or have degrees in this, or have abilities to do this or that or the other. The thing is that it's about money, and I understand that. I understand that the landlords and the poverty pimps want to make more money off people, and it's just not, it's a great idea. It's capitalism. We live in America. I understand that. It's acceptable. But the thing is that when people are dying outside because they have no place to live, we need to change things. And yeah, I'm willing to work. I'm willing to work for free to build places for people. And let's start using some creativity and some imagination to get people some housing.
Good message. Thank you for sharing it.
Thanks
for being here. Carla, Sue, I apologize. Have any items been pulled from the consent agenda?
Item 1079, pulled by Mr. Walsh.
Very good. Could you please call the roll on the remainder of the consent agenda?
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish. Salzman.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The consent agenda is adopted. First time certain item, 1072.
1072, authorize new construction financing in an amount not to exceed $4 million for the Magnolia 2 apartments located at 415 Northeast Fargo Street.
Colleagues, this ordinance is to authorize funding for the new construction of a 50-unit multifamily project in the northeast neighborhood. This is in the interstate urban renewal area. It's called the Magnolia 2 Apartments. The project will connect to the existing Magnolia apartments, and when finished, it's going to look as though it's all in one project. It's located a block south of the newly constructed 80-unit Beatrice Morrow Apartments. All of these units are subject to the city's preference policy. 6 of the units will serve households at or below 30% AMI, in other words, very low income, with 3 serving permanent supporting housing residents and the other 3 serving homeless families. And we have Shannon Callahan from the Portland Housing Bureau and Sarah Stevenson from Innovative Housing here to tell us a little bit more about this ordinance. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioner. Shannon Callahan of the Portland Housing Bureau. I'm really pleased to be here today and to be joined by Sarah Stevenson of Innovative Housing, Inc. to talk about one of the latest projects to begin in the North and Northeast neighborhood strategy area. This project will join a total of 501 other units that we've put into effect since enacting the strategy with the City Council in 2005. With that, I would like to just say that this was a NOFA, the first NOFA that we offered in 2017, February.
NOFA being?
I'm sorry, Commissioner, thank you. Notice of funds availability. So an award announcement for funding that we had available. And IHI and their marvelous design was the winner of that NOFA award, based predominantly on their work with low-income communities in that neighborhood and their ability to bring us a very cost-effective project. So with that, I'd like to just, you can see on your monitor a few pictures of the rendering of the building and how the buildings will work together. Sarah, if you want to talk through a little bit about so you'll be joining both of the two buildings together, which you can see now. There is an existing Magnolia 1, and then the second building will join that building. And this is a mix of the affordability of the building. We expect 145 people to be housed in those 50 units. So even though we talk about units, it's also important to focus on people. As the mayor mentioned, 30% of those units, 6 of the units will be at 30%, and 3 of those units will be permanent supportive housing. That's something that IHI agreed to after the fact with our new focus on this with the city and county on permanent supportive housing, so we're grateful for that. And the other units will actually be, the 30% units will be focused on families coming out of the homeless family system of care. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Sarah to give you a few brief words on the project.
Well, I was actually going to talk more about innovative housing because you guys have all the details about the project. I'm happy to answer questions. We also have our developer here if you guys have technical questions. I think we have some slides. I just was going to remind you, many of you know Innovative Housing. We've been developing, owning, operating in the Portland region for over 30 years. Our portfolio includes family housing, like Magnolia 2 will be, workforce housing, low barrier housing for adults, as well as permanent supportive housing for both singles and families. This is a list of some of the properties you may be familiar with that we've built and that we operate in the region. We're particularly proud of our 2015 historic rehabilitation of the Erickson Fritz Apartments, which some of you have visited, and also Magnolia 1, which we completed back in 2013. IHI pairs our housing with services that are designed to help our residents stay stable in housing and use it as a foundation for success in all aspects of their lives. This services aspect of what we bring to the table we think is really important. For families, our services include employment assistance, household budgeting, teen mentoring, summer lunch programs, after-school homework clubs, and assistance applying for college. At other properties, our services focus on helping residents manage chronic health conditions, address food insecurity, and obtain benefits to ensure financial stability. At all sites, we focus on eviction prevention and making sure our residents' basic needs are met, including providing winter coats for all of our resident children, which we're working on right now. We're very excited to partner with the city to complete the second phase of the Magnolia Apartments. As Mayor Wheeler said, it's designed to connect to Magnolia 1, which we built in 2013. At that time, we used a grassroots leasing strategy to very successfully ensure that we housed people who already lived and worked in the neighborhood, rather than further displacing people of color from Northeast Portland. We're really looking forward to working with the city's North-Northeast preference policy, which we've not yet had the opportunity to do, to continue that anti-displacement work and make sure that new housing opportunities at Magnolia 2, these 50 new homes, will be accessible to families with historic ties to the neighborhood. Magnolia 1 is all 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. As you've heard, Magnolia 2 will be focused on families. It has 1, 2s, and 3 bedroom apartments. It includes indoor and outdoor play space, and a new amenity that we're very excited about, which is a maker space, where residents can build, they can craft, they'll be able to explore the construction trades, and they'll be able to begin pre-apprenticeship training right there in the building. We're partnering with Constructing Hope to offer both introductory workshops for residents of our building and the neighborhood to the construction trades, as well as a youth training program right there in the space.
Excuse me one sec. We have a technical glitch. Can we either have the testifier on the screen or the PowerPoint or both?
The PowerPoint has concluded, Commissioner, so we're,
Bring it back to the testifier.
thank you.
Sorry, I was just going. The words weren't on the PowerPoint. There were just some pictures, I think, to help illustrate what we're talking about. But what we're really excited about is that these two buildings are going to connect. We'll end up with 100 affordable homes right here on this block that all have access to these really awesome opportunities for pre-apprenticeship training and to help low-income children and parents access good, high-paying jobs in the construction trades. In addition, we will, of course, bring our full range of family services to help residents succeed and make the most of their housing. We really appreciate the city's support and partnership in our efforts to bring more affordable housing to Portland. I'm happy to answer questions about the project if you have any, or also defer them to our technical experts if they're over my head.
Commissioner Fritz.
It looks like a great project. Thank you for your partnership. I noticed that Ms. Pangala is still here, and I was wondering if after the hearing you could check in with the person who testified about this very need. I mean, this is something the city's doing, is the $4 million. I don't know whether she would qualify for the preference policy, but this seems like a good opportunity to at least look into what might help. And thank you for all that you do for so many families and individuals.
Certainly.
And how much is our $4 million leveraging and other financing?
I believe the total project cost is $16 million. Yes, the total project cost is $16 million. And so we are able to contribute just a quarter of the cost of the project to get this project over the finish line. One of the things that we were very grateful for is this project had a small gap remaining to move it forward beyond what the city had contributed, and the new state LIFT program stepped in and awarded this project earlier this summer the remaining funds it needed. And with that, we are proud of this project, but we also were able to close all of the gaps with all of the projects that we had in the North and Northeast strategy area. So we'll be bringing all of those projects to fruition as we promised to the community, despite the fact that we've been facing tax credit pricing issues as well as rising costs in construction, which is really what has caused the gaps for our projects. But in combination with the great work of our affordable housing providers and the collaboration with the state and the available funds they've had, we're able to make our commitments to the community and to the preference policy families that we'll be bringing into those units. So we're very pleased at the collaboration and the ability to leverage. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you both, and thank you, Housing Bureau Director Shannon Callahan, for being here.
Thank you, Mayor.
In your capacity as the director. We appreciate it. Do we have public testimony on this item?
We have 4 people signed up.
Very good. Let's hear from them.
First 3, please come up. Lightning, Catherine Baker, and Maggie.
That was subtle there.
I never liked to be too Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you like to start?
Should I? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I would like to talk about the Portland Housing Bureau and the housing projects that you're putting up. They're not the numbers of 30% and homeless people that you're planning to house in these housing projects are a drop in the bucket. And you're cherry picking. You're taking people who have the most Social Security income and are the least disabled, and you're putting them in this housing. And then you're leaving to the shelter system where there's kennel cough, MRSA, lice, bed bugs, the most disabled. So that would be people with dementia, Alzheimer's, wheelchairs, walkers, canes, bipolar, schizophrenia, and then the economically excluded because they've been ousted out of their units because their rent has gone up and up and up and up, and they cannot afford it because they either work a low-paying job or they work part-time because they can't work a really, good job that will pay market rent. And so why you think you're going to get people out of tents and off the streets with this pathetic number of housing units and the most disabled in these human rights abusive poverty pimps perpetuating apartheid for profit it's like it's beyond me. You should be ashamed of yourselves. I'm ashamed for you. I'm ashamed for Portland. I'm ashamed for our society that this is the way we treat the most disabled, the ones who lack the capacity to defend themselves. I don't know how you can sleep at night. It's awful. These shelters, the Portland Rescue Mission, Salvation Army, these shelters where they're located, what's going on there, they should have been shut down years ago. You can't treat people like this. It is human rights violations. These people can't even take care of themselves, and this is the way you treat them.
Ma'am, could you put your name in the record?
My name's Maggie. If you want my full name from birth, you can have that off camera. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Creativity XX PDX1. I like the project. I think Innovative Housing Inc. is a good, respectable company. I just have some clarity, I guess, from my position. I always like to know the overall unit price, or per unit price. I understand that would be maybe around $300,000, if I'm correct. Again, I like to see the square footage of the units. Again, when we're talking the 2s, 3s, and the 1s, again, that's important to me to understand my analysis. Again, I like to also see from the developers and Innovative Housing Inc. the number of jobs created on these projects. It's very important to me when we're talking developing new units. I tried to get that information on a project from the Housing Bureau, and they didn't have the accurate information. I was surprised because when you start trying to get financing on a project, you better have some numbers in front of you that make sense to the people you're getting the financing from. So possibly this company could put on a website how many jobs are created on this project. Electricians, plumbers, painters, various jobs created. Very important to me. I like to also understand the materials being bought for this project because I like to see the money spent throughout the community. So we're putting money back into the communities. Now, also on this situation, it says financing, construction financing. I assume that's a loan. I assume that will be paid back upon permanent financing going into place, which that's the way I want it to be. Now, if you're going to tell me this is a grant, I need to be made aware of that as the public to understand that money's going to be not expected to be repaid. It does not state that here. Again, I like the overall project. I like the fact you're doing supportive housing. I don't like to use the term permanent supportive housing. Nothing's permanent in this world. Nothing. None of you up there either, unfortunately, unless you can find a cure for aging. But anyway, looks good to me. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. And were there two others, Sue?
Yes.
Thank you.
Catherine Baker and Charles Johnson.
Mr. Walsh. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. For the record, Charles Bridge Crane Johnson. And of course, on this small, as Maggie mentioned, drop in the bucket, although At $4 million apiece, we can't afford very many drops in a bucket that really needs a lot of work. But I think there's one interesting thing to note about this project in that, and it dovetails a little bit with what Lightning said about permanent supportive housing. This may be a stellar leading edge project if we, aside from the people who may be for the rest of their lives dealing with SPMI and needing permanent supportive housing, it's also focused on possibly getting people to break through that 60% MFI cap. And I think that that's something that, you know, it's a challenge, and I hope that IHI will be working closely with their tenants to talk about, you know, what happens when they break through that 60% MFI, and that there'll be resources in place to help those people adapt to the insanity of market rate housing in Portland. But you know, when we talk about dealing with people in poverty and dealing with homelessness, we have a whole spectrum of symptom severity. And it's great to see IHI, you know, there's talk about cherry picking, and that is something that needs to be looked at more seriously by Ms. Callahan at PHB and also Home Forward. But there are people who've for a while been stuck under 60% MFI, but they have the capacity to earn competitive market wages. They just need support and training. It's going to be a difficult challenge for you all to figure out with limited funding how much we can fund programs like that and how much we just need to look at large-scale shelter at places like Wapato and elsewhere to protect people from the elements, get them a little bit more stabilized so they can at least even apply for Social Security to be in a situation where, because we have very few units we talk about 30% MFI, but we never talk about the 0% people who haven't even been able to focus enough to be approved for SSI or SSD. So definitely this $4 million, it's a little bit of a question mark whether it's ever going to come back. Is it really financing? Is it a grant with the urban renewal money? But that's not as important as getting this project completed, opening up these 50 homes, which, you know, at first I wasn't clear from the presentation if every single unit is under 60% of the median family income. It is. We need these desperately. So I look forward to y'all approving this $4 million, but also talking to us about some things Ms. Callahan mentioned about, she says perhaps 500 units have come online recently. The 10-year plan for homelessness died, and it's very rare for us to see in this shelter, or see in this chambers, actual graphs about how the population for Portland is trending up and where the stagnation or even the drops in low-income housing were and how we're going to recover from that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Was there one more? I'm sorry.
Apparently not.
Very good. Colleagues, were there any more questions of staff? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
People lose their housing one person at a time, one family at a time, and people get into housing one person at a time, one family at a time. I really appreciate this project. 50 units is a lot on the things that we do, and they add up eventually. And remind everybody there are 2 ballot measures that those who are registered to vote will be able to act on November 6th. One would provide affordable housing for the metro area, and the other would make government dollars go further. So obviously I can't advocate one way or the other, but I just want to put it out there that those are there. And so if you're wondering what you can do, the answer is vote on November 6th, please. Aye.
Fish.
I want to join in what the mayor said earlier in congratulating Shannon on her appointment. Where's Shannon? Oh, she's back there. Congratulating Shannon Callahan on her appointment as the permanent director of the Portland Housing Bureau. She's done a superb job as the interim, and we look forward to working with her now that she has the permanent assignment. I don't remember the last time we had an application before us where all the units were 60% of median family income or below. I mean, so this really is where the highest degree of need is. I'm pleased that there are 3 units of permanent supportive housing, although obviously we'd like to do more in each project, but it's a good start. I think there's some confusion about who this is going to serve. This is in the Northeast Housing Strategy, so there is a right of return that attaches to a number of these units. I think some of the testimony was wildly off the mark because I don't think people understand who is intended to be served by this housing. But again, I think the presentation made clear. This is a good partner. We have a good record with this nonprofit partner. And I want to join in what Commissioner Fritz said, that for people that think we're not doing enough to boost the supply of affordable housing, measures 102 and 26199 squarely address that issue. And if that is very important to you, take a good look at. The voters pamphlet is out. There's a lot of pages of explanatory material, and I hope people take the time to look at that carefully, because it's part of a comprehensive set of steps we're taking, which will make a dent in the lives of people in our community. Aye.
Salzman.
Well, I want to thank Sarah Stevenson and Innovative Housing for their continued good work to serve people with good housing, with services. I'm very impressed with the array of services you mentioned are on-site and will be on-site, especially the job training and apprenticeship opportunities. This is a great project. I think it was the first project I toured as Housing Commissioner in 2013, the opening of it. And I remember then just being impressed with both IHI, but also the quality of the construction seemed very, very good, very durable. And I'm sure that will be carried forward to Magnolia too. So congratulations and good work, Director Callahan. Aye.
Wheeler.
Well, this is a great project. I appreciate the partnership. Thank you. This is really, in my mind, it gets sort of all three of the critical pieces. Number one, it provides a transition from either the streets or shelter into housing, and that's been a withering need in this community. Number two, it provides affordable housing to people in our community who are currently being priced out of our community. And number three, this provides the kind of wraparound services, including close proximity and pathways to job training and economic prosperity that people would naturally need. So I think this is a very, very well thought out and worthy project, and I'm very happy to be supporting it. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you. Next item, 1073, please.
1073, authorize financing in an amount not to exceed $3,213,319 for the redevelopment of the Oak Leaf Mobile Home Park.
Welcome back, Director Callahan.
Good morning, Mayor. Shannon Callahan of the Portland Housing Bureau. This morning, I'm happy to be joined by Laura Bennett and Heather Budge of the St. Vincent de Paul Society of Lane County. Hold on just a second, I'm trying to bring up my PowerPoint again. As some of you may remember, in June of 2016, the Oakleaf residents of the Oakleaf Mobile Home Park came to this council to talk about their distress at their park being sold and the desire to ask for help from City Council to help them retain this important asset, both for their stability and for the stability of the surrounding Cully community. The specific request at the time was a $1.5 to $6 million request to help with the purchase of the property from the park that was about to be sold to a private market developer. The park itself consisted of over 35 units at the time, and the park was in, frankly, very bad disrepair. You'll hear quite a bit about the situation at the park from St. Vincent de Paul themselves. But we, as the Housing Bureau, took on this project, realizing that it was important to not only save these residents, but have our first experience in the mobile home park preservation. This was the first time the Portland Housing Bureau had attempted to work on this financing. So the mobile home park now the costs are exceeding what we had originally estimated at $1.6 million. You'll hear a lot more, as I said, about the structure of the park and the issues, but quite frankly, almost every single part of the infrastructure of the park needed complete replacement or repair. Meaning the sewer was bad, the stormwater was bad, the electrical was bad, the units that people were living in, virtually almost all of them were unsafe and unsanitary, and quite frankly, should not have been, people should not have been living in those conditions for as long as they were living in those conditions. That said, these were still people's homes, and they still felt a strong sense of community, which is why we took the extra time and took extra money to make sure that this park would work. I will say that one of the major struggles was to find an operator of the park. We did not have a nonprofit working in Portland specifically on mobile home park rental preservation, but thankfully St. Vincent de Paul of Lane County had experience in this and was willing to come and work with us in the city of Portland and step in to help us learn how to do a new model. And we're very, very grateful for that. Just to give you a brief sense of the present mix of the park's residents, they are currently at low income levels. The majority of them are under 30% MFI, and their rents are currently affordable to those families. As I mentioned, the park initially had 34 spaces, but due to a variety of different factors, including the fact that there were just too many units crammed on the site, we reduced that number to 22. So the park is actually going to be run correctly and not having people, literally units crammed next to each other in unsafe and unsanitary ways. And again, here's a little bit of information for you about why the initial costs were so high.
I'm assuming you didn't turf anybody out. I mean, you didn't ask to reduce the number. How did you get from the number?
I think St. Vincent de Paul can talk with you because they
Right.
intimately know the details of every tenant, but no one was relocated unless they had a request to be relocated, and it's been quite the process to work with existing tenants in a park while you're trying to do sewer and infrastructure improvements and yet keep people in a place that they are safe. And so with that, I would just like to mention finally that one of the most challenging things about mobile home parks for us is the lack of ability to leverage any funds. Mobile homes themselves are not a financeable asset in the way that you would consider a traditional home to be financed. And so it makes the ability to leverage funds much more difficult. That said, St. Vincent de Paul, in collaboration with a lot of partners, have brought a lot of leverage to the table. I think we will be seeing more desire for us to work in an area related to mobile home park preservation, and our staff is prepared in the next year to bring you some recommendations about how we would structure those and ways of going about that. As you know, the overlay that you recently passed for mobile home parks is currently in place, but there are a number of parks presently that are being offered for sale on the private market. So with that, I am going to I'm going to turn it over to St. Vincent de Paul. And would you like me to pull your PowerPoint up at this point?
Yes, please.
Sorry, it'll take me a second. Okay, would you turn that off just for a moment, because I'm struggling to find it on the... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Heather Buck. I'm Special Projects Director for St. Vincent de Paul. Part of what I've been tasked with for the last 8 or 9 years is the renovation of extremely distressed mobile home parks, primarily in Lane County. When we were asked to come up here to Portland to take a look at this particular park, we welcomed the opportunity to share our knowledge and information about this naturally affordable, reoccurring affordable housing stock. We now have 8 parks in which we have done complete renovations for. We have one more in addition to Oakleaf that's actually in progress. I'm here mainly to respond to questions for you, but we did want to convey that this particular park has actually been one of the most complicated. We really target the most troubled parks in Oregon because of their impact on the surrounding community. We believe that what we provide in services and infrastructure and knowledge on this particular style of housing is incredibly beneficial for the rest of the community. Mainly, these parks house people that would otherwise be on the street. And they really are in substandard housing, but it is housing of some sort. We want to bring that to a higher level. And we are here today to ask for your support. It's been very complicated because of all the different entities that we coordinate together, and just the lack of infrastructure in the site. Normally we come into the parks and do some capital improvements, a new community center, some new roads, but this one was actually a park where we have to start from scratch. And also make sure that we don't displace anybody that's currently living there. It did start with 34 spaces, but due to several planning requirements, we had to reduce the number of spaces to make them clean and safe, and also have the correct setbacks so that emergency vehicles can get in and service the place as well. This is not uncommon. Most older parks do have far more houses in there than they should, just because of the lack of monitoring of these particular parks. We're here to help the city of Portland in any way we can regarding this particular housing stock. We look forward to working with more, and I'm available for any questions, should you have any.
I have a couple of questions. To what extent, so the replacement units that we would purchase, the mobile homes, where are they being, who are they being purchased from, and to what extent are we trying to capture some alignment with modular housing being built in the state of Oregon?
So we have a handful of park-owned units that we've pretty much all had to tear down, and some others that are tenant-owned. And those that are tenant-owned are allowed to keep them. We move them to the side while we're doing our work. For the new homes, we work with a private manufacturer, Golden Pacific. They have a particular floor plan that have been very well utilized for small spaces in many of our other parks. And we've developed a relationship with them over the years to make sure that we have quality housing and fit as many units in a space that we can.
Where are they located?
They have a Portland office, I think just outside of Portland, up here, and we work through I think a sales entity that works with that manufacturer.
But what about sort of aligning ourselves with Oregon manufacturers? I mean, there's a lot of work going on. The Bureau is particularly interested in modular housing and bringing down the price per unit. Can we be more intentional in that regard?
I am in many of those groups and forums with the other manufacturers and other providers in the state of Oregon. Modular housing is actually more expensive than manufactured housing, and there are fewer providers for them. We look forward to trying to develop that industry as well, because we want to have high quality homes, but the manufacturing housing industry also has some very good quality homes at a lower price point, so we can actually do more projects.
But Commissioner, I think you've raised a really good question and point that as we've indicated, I think we'd like to look into more and more. This was the first park that we have done in the city of Portland, and it has definitely been a learning lesson for everybody involved. And we would like to try to incent these parks going forward with more local products, and thank you for that
So,
suggestion.
Director Callahan, another question is, in light of the distress that we've identified in terms of the condition of the units and the basic infrastructure on the site, is there anything we've learned now that in hindsight would have impacted the price we paid to acquire the site?
I think, yes, I think so. I think also there's a question, this was a very important park to the residents and the community members. This was probably one of the more expensive parks you'll see us do. As you've just heard, we had no idea that how bad the sewer systems were, and those were some things that I think I can use the word cesspool about what was happening at the Oakleaf, which was not known to us. Originally, this park was planned to be an owner cooperative park, but based on the fact that the actual amount of money that would be needed to upgrade this park, we realized very quickly that the existing tenants of the Oakleaf Park would not be able to finance that themselves under the traditional cooperative model. But yes, we've learned a lot of lessons from this park, including, I think, getting a better sense of what we're getting into up front.
And the funding that we're being asked to approve today is mostly community development block grant money?
Yes.
So that's a precious commodity of which we have a scarce amount. Why did you settle on CDBG versus other potential funding sources?
Commissioner, as you, I'm sure are aware, most of our funding sources are still geographically tied, with the exception of the new construction excise tax as well as the Portland Housing Bond. The other two sources of citywide funds we have are both federal sources. At the time that we made this commitment to the project, in 2016, the housing bond had yet to materialize, and CET, construction excise tax, had not yet gone into place to develop enough funding. So our original commitment was with CDBG. As I've said, this park has exceeded our original cost estimates, but we felt that we at the Housing Bureau had made a commitment to the residents as well as to City Council to work on the preservation of this park. And St. Vincent de Paul stepped in very early on to help us. It is, even though our cost per unit is a little higher than we'd normally see, these are units that house folks that but for would truly be on the street. There are many people in this park who are not, there are many residents of mobile home parks that are not as successful in traditional multifamily developments. Had we known at the beginning of the price when we went in, we may have made a different decision. But as this was our first park, we learned a lot along the way, and we have a lot of lessons that, in collaboration with our partners, we can bring to our next work in this area.
Thank you.
So Director Callahan, would you say the main lesson learned here, a commitment was made in 2016, and obviously it was made in good faith to the community and the residents, and this is a very low-income population we're talking about, as you just said, but for their ability to maintain this housing, they would very possibly end up on the streets, but that we really didn't do the detailed level of due diligence in advance, particularly on the infrastructure. So is the lesson that we need to do more of that due diligence before we make a commitment to the community?
I would say that it is partially that, yes, but I also think that as this was our first project, we did not know the extent of what we didn't know. And this project has taught us a lot, and I think it will help us in deciding deciding how we move forward with mobile home park preservation acts in the city of Portland. I will also say that this was probably, in everybody's minds, one of the worst-run parks in the city of Portland at the time in terms of the maintenance and infrastructure, and there were some things that we did know at the outset, and some we didn't. But yes, Mayor, we've learned a lot from this park and how we would choose to make investments going forward.
So in 2016, we made this commitment, and I want to be very clear, while I'm not particularly happy about the way it's unfolded, this commitment was made, and I think we have an obligation to uphold that commitment. But there's another piece to this too, which is that the park was allowed to deteriorate to the condition that you described in a particular way. I'm not going to use the word because frankly, I've just eliminated it from my vocabulary. But it feels like there's a lesson learned in terms of the deal, the transaction, in terms of due diligence that maybe could have been conducted in 2016. But there's also the question of how did the park get to the point where people were living without basic utilities that were functional? And that's not really your specific portfolio, but it's all of our responsibility to take a good hard look at that and ask the question, have we repaired that part of the question, that part of the equation?
Commissioner, I'm sorry, Mayor, I don't believe that we have fully repaired that part of the question. There are always issues with how to enforce and when to enforce with the Bureau of Development Services and how to work with park owners or property owners. This was a park, honestly, of last resort for many individuals. There were many things in the park that you would not even consider to be a mobile home. Were literally kind of more like little teeny trailers, et cetera, very old, being rented at really substandard conditions with very high rents. So I think that, the city does their best to try to figure out the balance of when to enforce their requirements. And I don't know that any of us knew the extent of how bad the park was until we actually got into the park and were able to see some of the homes from themselves. Because these are individually owned units. They are not, they were not rentals. Mobile home parks are a unique creature, as it were, in the housing market, where the pad space is normally rented, but the homes themselves are individually owned. And so there are a lot of unique challenges regarding mobile home park preservation going forward.
Thank you.
So I guess, so will the new homes be owned by the residents or owned by us or?
They'll be owned by the park. The new homes that are purchased for the spaces will be owned by the park, and then the handful of ones that are owned by the tenants will continue to be owned by the tenants and just placed on new updated pads.
And when you say owned by the park, who is the owner? Is that us, the city?
That would be St. Vincent de Paul as the developer.
St. Vincent, okay. Thank you.
Very good. Does that complete your presentation?
Yes.
Very good. Is there public testimony on this item, Carla?
Yes, we have 5 people signed up.
Very good.
The first 3 are Joe Walsh, Lightning Super Creativity, Catherine Baker. Is Catherine Baker here?
Go ahead and start. Thank you.
My name is Joe Walsh. I'm going to stand because I'm having some problems. This is the only case that I know of that you have a trailer court that's a mess. And we're going to redevelop it and buy it. And we made huge mistakes along the way. So we're saying, okay, this is a good thing because it's low income, $17,000 to $50,000 according to your paperwork, which means it'll exclude everybody on the street. It has nothing to do with them. It has to do with people that are living there, I presume. The question that came up, and I'm not sure, when I raised my thumb, I thought you asked the question, Commissioner Fish, of who owned the property before this? Who did we buy it from? And what responsibility do they have for the mess? I mean, when you go in and sell a house, it's evaluated. Didn't we do an evaluation on this? This is $3 million. You know, I don't spend that on lunch. It's a lot of money to me. I don't know if it is to you. I guess if it's not yours, maybe not. This is a screwed up job, and everybody is saying how wonderful it is. It is not wonderful. And if you do this the way you're planning to do it, you're going to leave low-income people all by themselves. And if we learn anything from the projects of New York and Chicago and anywhere else that they built them, you can't do that. You have to intermingle people. Don't do this. If you say 17,000 to 50,000, my retirement is only 35,000. So I would qualify for this, I guess. But how are you going to keep this place up and running? What you guys do is spend the money and walk away all the time. We see it over and over and over again. You spend the money on the nonprofits and you walk away. And the nonprofits screw it up. Then they come back for more money. I can't believe my 3 minutes is not up. Carry on. We object to this officially.
Yes, my name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Creativity XXPDX1. Again, to St. Vincent's de Paul, I look at you kind of like China on the trade agreements. We had people doing those agreements that really didn't protect the interests of the people. Now, here's what I'm going to say. I don't have an issue with St. Vincent's de Paul. I want to ask, is this financing going to be paid back, which I assume it's not. It's a block grant, okay? So obviously you know you have an issue with me on that, where the financing came from. Issue number 2, we're about $5,200,000 overall project. That, my understanding, puts us up to about a maybe $40,000 per unit valuation, if I'm correct. Again, you get down to the numbers and you start to say to yourself, and I say this all the time, and I've said this before to you, Commissioner Salzman, build new. Build new. When it starts to cost you as much money to renovate something, you want to build new. Again, why I've been stating this, you create jobs, you build everything up to ADA standards, you build everything new. So you're employing the people in the community, you're buying materials in the community, and you're getting something new which is going to have much more longevity than renovating something. Now, here, if we start looking at this again, and we're talking these bonds, and I hope people will listen on this, we're looking at this project of being downsized to 22 units, downsized. Now, this is where it gets interesting. There's only going to be 5 of the remaining people that will stay in this park. 5 of the remaining, because they're going to buy all brand new units, and they're going to rent those out at 60% and above MFI. So when you're talking preserving and taking care of the current people that were currently there, we missed the mark. We missed the mark so bad you can't even begin to understand. And Commissioner Fritz, I'm going to point at you on this one, because I think you really wanted to see something happen on this property. You've done your nice little new park over there, and you wanted that community input, that you wanted to save this park. Guess what? Build new. Build something new. Build something that will last. Build some family-sized units. Build something that creates jobs in the community. Build something that actually has longevity for many, many years. And again, like I say, this is well over the budget, well overpriced. And if anybody in the investment community, anybody out there, even you, Donald Trump, and I know you know a lot more than I do, trust me, I already know that, find me a mobile home park in Northeast Portland that it's going to be $5,200,000 for 22 units. Anybody find me one out there? Isn't going to happen. Congratulations. We made history. Highest priced park in Northeast Portland. Congratulations, public. It's your money. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. My name's Ida Catherion, and my goodness. Okay, I lived in one of these places before, to my chagrin. Not this particular place, but yes, they're always in disrepair unless they're absolutely brand new. And I don't even know where to go with this, except to say that if improvements are made, of course it's going to cost more money, and whether yeah, it can create more jobs, and it better create more jobs within this area. But the thing is that any sort of improvement that's made there, the rent's going to go up. It actually is going to not really achieve what the idea or the so-called hopeful idea might be, which is to house more people. Yeah, it may house more people, but still in a substandard way, and the rent will go up. Oh, Lord. Okay, I really wanted to start this piece by quoting a person that is alive no more, named William Blake. You might have heard his name before. He said, Vox Populi was Vox Deus. You guys understand the translation? It means the voice of the people is the voice of God. Okay? Anyway, beyond that, yes, we need more places for people to live that are affordable, that are safe, that are clean, that the sewers that are taken care of, that are monitored, things that are monitored. Just because it's low-income people or you know, not the right part of town or whatever, these places need to be monitored, they need to be kept up, and they need to be accountable, just like me, just like you guys, in whatever we do. And there's a lot of manpower, people power out there that we can, and there's a lot of people that are very willing to help make these things work. And accountability is very important in every aspect of all this, whether it be a new court, whether it be an old court, and upkeep, yeah, that's really important too. But it doesn't happen as much. Upkeep and you know, accountability with things like sewers and, you know, sanitary systems and running water and electrical. These places aren't kept up like that and aren't monitored typically and historically. Oh, Dan, don't fall asleep yet. Yeah, because they're low rent places. Most people don't care. They just kind of want to put people in these places, say, yeah, their house is good. So what if the toilets aren't working? And so what if they don't have running water? It's just part of it. But thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I have a question for Shannon.
The last two who signed up are Maggie and Charles Bridgecrane Johnson.
I signed up, I got that one as well, but I signed on the wrong list, and I just want to speak to the issue.
You were signed up on 1074.
Come on up, Sarah. I thought I signed up on this one's phone.
You're not on here.
Okay, first I want to say how much I love Joe Walsh and Lightning and Charles for coming every week. And second of all, I want to say how much I approve the idea of preserving these low-income places like mobile home parks, because and I want to talk about that due diligence and about the not knowing what they did not know. That sounds like very Ollie North talk there. Ted, I bet you didn't know you were going to be Portland's slumlord when you hired on to be mayor. And yet that's what you are. So what I want to say is this is a good idea to take these units and either give new units or fix them up, or how about allowing tiny homes in these mobile parks? Because I have priced out 10 by 20 Sherway units with solar panels for the electricity, with 2 hot water tanks, one for the bathroom and one for the kitchen, hooked up to these solar panels, and very expensive composting toilets at $8,000. Okay, unassembled, not like Emmett, that guy Emmett who wanted to do those 40,000 units or $40,000 units. He's up in Seattle right now, and he's got a $12 million grant to house 72 people. I'm saying you could do units with solar panels, with very expensive composting toilets that only need to be cleaned out once or twice a year for $8,000. And that's like with a wraparound porch, 10 by 20, raised roof, loft for the bed unless they're disabled, and then they can have it, all one level. And you could do that for $8,000 per unit. What is that? That's like that is unassembled. So you would have to have volunteers from, say, Lowe's, from Home Depot, from Habitat Humanity come in and, assemble these units. But I'm talking about, that's including the solar panels, that's including the hot water, that's including the smoke detectors, the sinks, the fire extinguishers, everything, soup to nuts, $8,000 a unit, unassembled. Now, I realize that guy who went up to Seattle, he wanted to do them $40,000, and he wanted to assemble them and then put them there. But I think we could get volunteers to have these things up in no time. And when you're talking about the fact that you don't have to have an elevator, you don't have to have a sewer, you would have to have a gray water system. Well, okay, from the kitchen sink, from the shower, okay, you can just go directly into the sewer. Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Charles Bridge Crane Johnson. But it's probably not me who should be sitting here at this table. It should probably be Tracy Reeve, City Attorney, explaining why we didn't do what we were supposed to do, which is sue the piece of crap assholes that you bought this property from.
Okay, just a reminder, we have an FCC requirement here. Let's keep it clean.
So this is the city that works hard to overpay predatory poverty pimps. You're going to buy the flea bag, bedbug infested West Wind apartments and reward that scumbag slumlord with a big chunk of city cash or managed through the county. You rewarded the predatory pimp who did disgusting things to the people that were residents at this property. And now I want my $119,000. That's if we spread that out over the 27 units. But really, we're just paying for 22. So I actually want $146,000.59. I guess I'll have to go file a lawsuit over in the federal court against you and Tracy Reeves to get it. And then I'll put up 22 trailers. So these people, the city made a commitment. I understand why you're going to approve yes on this, but you're not going to, doesn't sound, you did ask a couple of good questions, Ted, about what we have learned from this. It's a very expensive lesson. There should be an after-action report on how we screwed this up, where the original 35 people went, how many are dead or suicided or taking up space in other public housing units. Mr. Fish, you asked about Golden Pacific. Apparently, we think these trailers are made maybe in Northern California. They do have two offices, Milwaukee and I think Tigard or one of the T-towns, Tualatin, something like that. So there is some keeping the money circulating through the Oregon economy, but maybe we should have gone with modular housing and a higher price for this welfare project. I mean, it's not, we've had Catholic Charities manage the Kenton Women's Village. 12 people, almost half as many as here. I don't think we did $119,000 expenditure per woman in the Kenton Women's Village, but we should have. So please know that I'll be this obnoxious and worse until the report comes out and talks about the lessons learned and the actual lives that were impacted. 35 original residents. Now we're going down to just 27 spaces. 5 of the original owners. I don't want to say jackpot because these are people that have been through some trauma in their lives. And hopefully our friends from down in DeFazio land, Mr. DeFazio's constituents there in Eugene and Lane County are excellent people. The St. Vincent de Paul Society locally does some good work. But when we have tens of thousands of people or maybe only 9,000 people sleeping outdoors every night on a limited budget. We could have done better. We know this started under the previous mayoral administration, and you've had a lot of distractions. I appreciate your tone that you maybe you wish you'd had a little tighter oversight on this or better outcomes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does that complete public testimony?
I think he meant
That's all who
exploitation.
signed up.
Very good. Was there any
Yeah, I
further
have a question
questions?
for Shannon.
Commissioner Fish had a couple of questions for Director Callahan. Welcome back.
Yeah, I have two questions. We had some testimony about who were serving at this location, and we did fill the chambers with people that urged us to acquire the site when it was at risk. They were at risk of being displaced. Have we tracked what's happened to the existing tenants?
Yes, we are working with a number of the existing tenants in the park themselves. In the 5 of them were owner-occupied units, meaning they were actually the owners of their coach, their mobile home. And so those are the ones that are getting moved over to the side. When you have a mobile home loan, it's a commercial loan, not the type of loan that you would think of when you are a homeowner where you have a 30-year mortgage and interest terms. You're actually on a general loan that one would think of more for an automobile. And so the loan terms are not as favorable as a home mortgage. There are a variety of different factors. It is really hard to sell these coaches once you own them because, quite frankly, they depreciate so quickly over time. Those owners are being taken care of, and we also have additional residents that are remaining in the park that'll be moved into new units that will be owned by St. Vincent de Paul themselves. So yes, we are tracking that, Commissioner.
And my second question is, in terms of what we've learned here, at what point do the costs of redeveloping as a mobile home park reach a point where it's in our best interest to consider other kinds of redevelopment, including multifamily?
I believe that this park is a very good example of a potential situation where a different development type would have been more cost-effective and provided more density on the project. That said, at the time, this council was faced with a lot of different members of this mobile home park who do have loans on these homes. So when a park closes, they're essentially left homeless and even more in debt with their initial coach. I would not, if I had the benefit of hindsight on this project, I would not recommend this one as one to go forward with. I will say that I agree with Mr. Johnson, and the staff is preparing an after-action report on this project, as well as some guidance, because I believe that we will be called upon more and more in the future to look at mobile home park preservations, especially as the design overlay or the changes in zoning have gone into effect. A number of parks are now, as I mentioned, for sale. I will say that this park was not purchased by the city. This park was initially intended to be purchased by the owners themselves, of the owners of the coaches, in a cooperative home ownership model. And at the time, this property had actually initially been sold to another developer, and the park residents were able to use a variety of different tactics available to them through state law to get the rights to actually purchase this property. So just to clear up a few issues, but yes, Commissioner, I think that in hindsight, this would not have been a good park to necessarily invest in the way that we have invested. That said, I think there are a lot of lessons learned for us going forward, and this was the very first time we'd ever done a mobile home park preservation in the city of Portland.
Thank you.
I have some questions.
Commissioner Daly.
Thank you. So I'm still a little confused because we've reduced the number of units and not everyone who was living in the park is still there. So was anyone involuntarily displaced, or did they lose their housing as a result of this development?
No one has been involuntarily displaced. Many residents actually requested to move to other areas, and those residents were primarily ones who were renting the actual pads and and homes attached to those pads or spaces. Everyone who's asked to remain, St. Vincent de Paul is working with them to remain, including the owners of the 5 coaches themselves. And instead of replacing those coaches, they're working to do weatherization and other improvements to make sure that there are no leaks, that they're habitable, that their electricity is safe. So there is a large amount of work going on, but no one was displaced involuntarily.
And a couple points of clarity for the public. It's going to provide space for 22 mobile homes, correct?
Yes.
Do you know roughly how many people will be housed? Because I think there's an impression that only 22 people will live there, and I'm assuming it's going to be double that or more. About 60?
About 60.
Okay. And also, to be clear, I do think this is an extraordinary amount of money to put in to a property of this nature and share regrets and frustrations, but between the city and the developer, we're not spending $5 million on 22 mobile homes. We're spending that on roads, sewer, community center. Is that correct?
Yes, and trying to make sure that we also have the service space and the space for these families and the kids that are living in these parks to actually have the type of services that they need to be successful. This park will be regulated for the next 99 years. It is not a short-term investment nor a short-term commitment by our partners from Lane County who stepped in to really help us save this park. We had no model to do this before. It had never been the city's. We had never even attempted something of this type. So, yes, Commissioner, thank you.
And obviously, the developer has a history in this particular area, rehabbing trailer mobile home parks, and I assume has a good reputation.
Very good reputation, and quite frankly, as I mentioned, we sought them out because of their work, especially with low-income communities in Lane County, and their reputation in the nonprofit community. And they stepped up in a very big way to come to Portland and try to help these tenants and help us preserve this park. So I have great gratitude for St. Vincent de Paul and great respect for their work.
Yeah, and I mean, I really don't want to minimize the expense, but I think it's important when we're looking at these numbers to not oversimplify it and only consider the per unit cost, because there are a lot of other expenses that went into this park, not just the individual units.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. Please call the roll.
Daly?
Well, I share a lot of the frustrations in the room, and it sounds like those are also shared by the mayor and other commissioners perhaps, as well as our new housing director. Congratulations, Director Callahan. It's a commitment that the city made over 2 years ago. It predates the mayor and I. It predates the current housing director. I think it's important to keep in mind we're housing 60 low-income individuals, and this was an anti-displacement effort. And I hope we will get it more right in the future. We've done a really poor job preventing or mitigating displacement during this lengthy, ongoing housing crisis, and this was a well-intentioned effort. This is also the worst kind of profiteering during a housing crisis. It's reprehensible to me that this landlord was not only allowed to raise rents when they were providing dangerous and substandard conditions, but was allowed to charge rents at all. And it just underscores how vital it is that we get our rental registration system up and running, and we start the mandatory rental inspections through BDS, which is one of the efforts that I hoped to begin during my tenure as the commissioner in charge of BDS. I'm going to strongly support policies in the future that harshly penalize landlords who are providing substandard housing. I'm gonna vote aye. It's with regrets, but we need to do this. We need to follow through on our promises and move forward and keep these 60 people housed. So, aye.
Fritz.
When the Housing Commissioner made the decision to buy the Oakleaf in the previous mayoral administration, this room was packed upstairs and downstairs with people telling us to do it, including some of the people who are here in this chambers today. And as Commissioner Uday just said, when government promises something, we should keep our promise. And we have invested a lot of money in learning. I appreciate that there'll be an after-action report. Thanks to Living Cully, who did some interim work with the Oakleaf residents while a long-term owner and operator was located. Thank you very much to St. Vincent de Paul of Lane County for coming up to Portland and helping us learn from your experience. And thank you to the residents of the Oakleaf for their patience and engagement during this project. As Director Callahan said, not everybody does best in multifamily housing, and these low these homes and communities can be wonderful places for people to succeed, as we heard from the residents of the Oakleaf in 2016. Aye.
Fish.
Well, I share the frustration of my colleagues on this one, and it's clearly a close call. And I think what's been documented at the very least is a painful learning curve. We made a commitment. We're trying to use this as a sort of a living laboratory to understand better how we might save this critically important piece of the affordable housing spectrum. I think based on that commitment and based on the quality of our partner, it tips the scales in favor of moving forward, but we need to get it right going forward. Aye.
Saltzman.
Well, as the Housing Commissioner who brought this proposal forward, I think that none of us really thought the ownership model was going to pan out. And we were on the hook for $1.5 million. That was it. And the advocates were going to somehow come up with the rest of the money from the state or somewhere else. But it didn't pan out. And I think most of us at the time didn't think the ownership model was going to pan out. It's just not possible. But the dynamics are not going to change for other mobile home parks that come before this council. I think there will be others. We passed that overlay. I recall from the report, there's thousands of people, maybe 9,000 people living in mobile home parks of questionable, both questionable ownerships in terms of predatory rents, but also just the conditions of the housing stock themselves. So this problem will not go away. So I think it's good that we're sort of truing up here on the Oakleaf and really realizing that at the time we knew the 1.5 we thought was going to make this issue go away from our perspective didn't go away. And when we deal with the next mobile home park, we'll have better, accurate, more information about how much we're in it for. But as Commissioner Fritz just said, these are real people. This housing is important to them, and it's important that we help them. And I'm sure we have learned our lessons around the next ones. Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the ordinance is adopted. So we are way behind schedule, so I'd like to pull one item. Could you read item 1086, please?
1086, amend Portland Renters Protections Code to clarify the exemption for affordable housing providers.
I'm pulling this item back to my office. There are some technical adjustments that need to be made. We'll reschedule this for another time. I want to make sure this item gets the time that it is due. We have a very long agenda today, and we're only at the very beginning of it, and therefore, henceforth, public testimony will be limited to 2 minutes. Could you please read item 1074?
Amend contract with Versaterm, Inc. for upgrades and maintenance to the computer-aided dispatch system used by the Bureau of Emergency Communications. Increase the authorized not-to-exceed amount by $215,000.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Bob Causey. I'm a director of the Bureau of Emergency Communications. It's a pleasure to be here today. The purpose for our visit, first of all, I'd like to introduce Merle Morley. He's our technical systems manager, and if there's any specific technical questions, I'll defer to him. We're here today to request an amendment to a contract between Versaterm and the City of Portland for the computer-aided dispatch system used by our Bureau to increase the authorized not-to-exceed amount by $215,000 from $9 million to $9,215,000. There is no fiscal impact as these funds are already available within our existing budget. November 14th of 2007, an ordinance was passed authorizing the replacement of the computer-aided dispatch system used by the Bureau. In July of 2009, the contract with Versaterm was made effective with a not-to-exceed amount of $7 million, and that amount included funding for maintenance for the first 6 years. After that, in November of 2016, an ordinance was passed to increase the amount to $9 million to cover anticipated support costs and system upgrades beyond that original 6-year timeframe. Today, we're asking Council to increase the not-to-exceed value of the contract by $215,000 to $9,215,000, and that additional value will be used to pay the remainder of the outstanding support invoice covering this fiscal year and for Versaterm charges for system upgrades that we anticipate early of 2019. Those projects include a CAD-to-CAD upgrade, which ties our computer-aided dispatch system to the rest of the regional computer-aided dispatch systems. Additionally, we have an implementation of a protocol called Automatic Secure Alarm Protocol, or ASAP to PSAP. And what this feature does is allows alarm companies to enter data that appears automatically in our computer-aided dispatch system. That prevents our call takers from having to take calls from the alarm companies and tying up the calls so that we're not able to answer 911 calls at the time. Additionally, we would like to implement a priority medical dispatch system as mandated by Multnomah County Emergency Medical Systems. Contract number 3000502 between Versaterm and the City of Portland for the CAD system is up for renewal July 3rd of 2019, and we'll be working with the Bureau of Technology Services and Procurement on a new support contract for the future. Do you have any questions?
Well, that was intriguing where you said the CAD systems from the area would now be like linked? Or?
Yeah, we already have a CAD-to-CAD system in place. We're in the process of upgrading it, and much of the upgrade costs are paid for by a grant and tying all of the regional 911 centers together. There could be some unanticipated costs on our side that may not be covered by the grant, so we want to make sure that we have funding available for that.
Thanks.
Very good. Is there public testimony on this item?
Yes, we have 4 people signed up. Sarah Hobbs, Ida Pingala, and Maggie.
Carla, do you know what that sound is?
Yeah. It's something coming out of the speakers.
Over your head, by the way. For the record, my name is Sarah Hobbs. BOAC is a mess. On July 13th of this year, I was on a number 6 bus going to North Portland when I saw a suicidal man literally standing mid-span on the south rail of the Hawthorne Bridge. I screamed to get people to call because I did not have my cell phone on me. One passenger called and got put on hold for quite a while, not knowing what to do, but frantic. I ran to the bus operator and said, there is a suicide crisis going on the Hawthorne Bridge. Would you please call this into your dispatch? I followed up later and found that the only 2 calls that got through was God bless that person who stayed on hold for God knows only how long, and somebody from TriMet. Thankfully, the Bureau of Behavioral Health Unit's Enhanced Crisis Intervention team got to the man in time, but it resulted in 10 cars, a full shutdown of the Hawthorne Bridge, and an hour and a half, almost 2-hour effort. But thank God they got the man to help. When time is of a severe issue in serious life-threatening emergencies, we cannot have people put on hold with emergency communications. Something needs to be done.
Thank you.
Truth
morning.
comes to the city. Truth does not emanate from the city. Okay, I agree. If you're going to budget, I understand there was something wrong with the computer system. Please do not prioritize your calls so that the rich get served first and that the poor get served last. This idea of you going into a rich guy's home who's got unlocked long guns and calibers of bullets all over the place, and you're going to serve this guy who's having a heart attack. You know, as far as I'm concerned, he can have a heart attack and die because I'm pro-gun control. But then disabled people in a wheelchair or with a cane or a walker or bipolar, schizophrenia, you stage those calls and you don't get to these people. And guess what? The federal government did a study and said that the sooner you get to the hospital for those patients, the less money they cost in medical care. So when you stage and prioritize poor people last, guess what? They go to the hospital and they cost more money to take care of because they're sicker when they get there. Thank you.
Thank you. Please call the roll. Oh,
We've
there's
got
more?
Ida Pingala and Charles Bridge Crane Johnson.
Come on up.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Charles Bridge Crane Johnson for the record. Thank you, Commissioner Schultzman. You've got BOEC, so hopefully a few months from now we'll see either Loretta Smith or Joanne Hardesty as Commissioner in charge of BOEC. And they will have a very important job after you all vote in favor of this $211,000 or $215,000 cost adjustment. BOEC also, like Ms. Callahan noted, independent reports need to come from bureaus and need to go to the public. It's especially important for BOEC because even the mayor can have no confidence in the information he gets from the Portland Police Bureau about the guns that are on top of parking garages and whether their ammo is in the same car or moved to a different car, or whether we don't tell the mayor for 1 or 2 months, or whether the police chief goes on the air and says crap about people on the left while hiding the fact that, oh, and I also found some right-wing protesters with guns on the
This is
roof.
about the contract. Can we focus on the contract,
So,
please?
with thank you, Ted. With BOEC, and this is also important for the quality of your work, Mr. Mayor, you need to be able to task someone on your staff to look at analysis of the calls coming into BOEC and contrasting that with the information or disinformation you're getting from some of the reliable people and some of the unreliable people in the Portland Police Bureau. So approve this $200,000. Versaterm will give you a lovely system. For a little bit of extra money, they'll probably even tell you how you can have a special super watchdog to make sure that we're getting quality policing and not some bullshit propaganda game.
Does that complete public testimony?
That's all who signed up.
Please call the roll.
Udaly,
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. That brings us to time certains, 1075 and 76. Please read them together.
1075, consider the proposal of Tim Sotuda, Southwest Hills LLC, and the recommendation from the hearings officer for removal of conditions of approval imposed by prior comprehensive plan map and zoning map amendment ordinances for property at 2855 Southwest Patton Road, LU 18-112666 CPZC. And 1076, remove conditions of approval imposed by prior comprehensive plan map and zoning map ordinances for property at 2855 Southwest Patton Road at the request of Tim Sotuda, Southwest Hills LLC, LU 18-112666 CPZC.
So, colleagues, I need a motion to approve the revised findings for item 1075.
So moved.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fish, a second by Commissioner Fritz. Carla, please call the roll.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
I appreciate everybody who testified. This is a really close call for me, and I believe that, or I hope that the 3,000 square foot commercial area in this new development will get used commercially, and that the neighborhood will be happy with it. I recognize that there's many people who are disappointed that it's not going to be a large grocery store. Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
No.
Wheeler?
Aye, the motion passes. This is a second reading, I'm sorry, and you already read the ordinance. This is a second reading of the ordinance for item 1076. Carla, please call the roll.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Thanks to Lauren Hill and Lynn Reese for their land use guidance, to Mark Moffat and the staff at the Bureau of Development Services, and again, for all the community input. Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
No.
Wheeler?
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. On to the regular agenda, items 1081 and 82 can be read together, please.
1081, accept a grant in the amount of $105,060, appropriate $35,000 for fiscal year 2018-19, and authorize an intergovernmental agreement with Multnomah County for the Domestic Violence Enhanced Response Team to be partially reimbursed for a police bureau sergeant through September 30, 2020. And 1082, authorize a memorandum of understanding with the partner agencies that constitute the Domestic Violence Enhanced Response Team for the stated project goals listed in the Office of on Violence Against Women fiscal year 2017-2020 grants to encourage arrest policies and enforcement of protection orders, grant program application, and award.
Very good. And we have staff here. Come on up. Thanks for being here. Welcome.
I'm Derek Rodriguez, Captain of the Family Services Division. Hello.
Thank you, Captain.
The timing of it all, Sergeant Mason just stepped out, and he's supposed to give a little presentation, but I'll hold on until he gets here and let
Yes.
Ms. Bray go.
Okay, thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. My name's Peggy Samolinsky, and I have the privilege of working with Multnomah County with the Department of County Human Services. Shall I wait?
There it is.
He's here. How about if we let him go first, and if that's okay with you, sir?
Here he comes. He's
Yeah.
rushing up.
Here he goes.
It never fails, right? You're waiting for 2 hours and you leave the room for 30 seconds and you get called up. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. My apologies.
No worries.
My name is Ron Mason. I'm a sergeant with the Portland Police Bureau, assigned to the Domestic Violence Enhanced Response Team. This project has been a 14-year collaboration with the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, the DA's Office, Department of Community Justice, Animal Services, DHS, and community-based advocates, as well as Multnomah County. The PPB team is comprised of 2 police officers, Multnomah County detective, and 2 community-based advocates. We serve a vulnerable population that is at high risk for lethality in domestic violence situations. Our focus is on interagency collaboration to be able to hold offenders accountable and help the survivors and their children to live in a peaceful situation. The valuable work that we do has no doubt in my mind has lessened the violent consequences as well as prevented further violence and homicides. So thank you for considering this grant proposal.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Great, thank you. Again, Peggy Samolinsky with Multnomah County. I am currently the interim manager for the Domestic and Sexual Violence Coordination Office because my colleague Rose Bach recently departed. So I'm going to start today with 2 quotes from survivors who have engaged in services through Divert. One who said, "I will forever be changed by this experience and seeing the good people who are courageous when you're in crisis." Another woman reported, "The advocate and team I worked with saved my life and helped me rebuild my self-esteem." So the Divert grant, overall grant, supports kind of several areas, both capacity building and training for community members and partners, as well as direct services. So in 2017, the Divert team provided 20 trainings to over 550 professionals working in the fields of law enforcement, community justice, and victim advocacy. During the last year, we've spoken at several conferences around the work and about this partnership that we have with the Portland Police Bureau to speak about the successful collaborations and how this is a model for others to try to replicate. And in 2019, we're super excited to be invited to present specifically about the Divert collaboration at the End Violence Against Women International Conference in San Diego, California. So that's a big honor for us to be asked to do that. During 2017, the Divert team worked with over 150 victims of high risk for lethality and domestic violence situations. The team provides advocacy and safety for survivors and accountability for perpetrators. Being able to work collaboratively with local community agencies, local law enforcement, and other system providers has increased the safety of survivors who are experiencing and attempting to leave violent domestic violence situations. For the last 14 years, this Divert program has provided an essential service in a collaborative capacity to Multnomah County, reaching survivors and their children at some of their most vulnerable times. It's in this collaborative spirit that we're here today to ask you to support the IGA and MOU. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Does that complete your presentation? Any further questions before we get to public testimony?
So do we get 3 additional Divert people funded through this grant?
Not 3 additional, Commissioner. It's continues what we've been funding. So it's some part of a sheriff of the Multnomah County, part of the sergeant, and then 2 direct service advocates in the community.
Okay, thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. Public testimony?
Yes, we have 4 people signed up. The first 3 are Sarah Hobbs, Ida Pingala, and Maggie.
My name's Sarah Hobbs. 21 years ago, in the middle of the night, I and my children fled a domestic violence situation. It was a lot of services. This was 21 years ago. Plans in place then are gone. But what I hear is the services that they are proposing were similar services that helped me. I literally spent my first day in the shelter was the day of my 10th wedding anniversary. I was, got married at 18, had no skills, fled with my kids in the middle of the night. I beg you to agree to support because we need the law enforcement. Women are at their most vulnerable for being murdered in domestic violence murders when they leave. I got married at 18, was a stay-at-home mom, had no job skills, nothing. It was services like what they proposed that helped my family make it. But I have been concerned that these services were gone. I am encouraged beyond belief to hear that some of these are coming back. I wish there was still some discussion about domestic violence transitional supportive housing, because that's what saved me and my family. I didn't hear that. That has me kind of sad. But everything else, please, women's lives can depend on it. And for people like me who were also fleeing with children, it can be more than just women whose lives will depend on this. And I beg you, please support.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for sharing your story. Thank you. Good
I just
morning.
want to say, I think funding domestic violence programs are important because I see in the shelter women of all economic backgrounds who've been affected by domestic violence, and there needs to be a program not only just for them to get out of the situation, but then help them rebuild their lives. That's all I want to say.
Thank you,
And
Maggie. Appreciate it.
And the last person is Charles Bridge Crane Johnson.
You're good. All right, thank you. Any further questions, colleagues of staff? Please call the roll.
This is
I'm sorry, these are non-emergency. Item 1081.
If I could just
Oh,
say
Commissioner
something.
Saltzman, you bet.
I thought we were voting. I just want to thank Captain Rodriguez for his leadership of the Family Services Division and Sergeant Mason for his leadership of the Domestic Violence Reduction Unit. It's really tough work that you do, you gentlemen do, and your colleagues at the county, the district attorney's office, and at the city. And we really appreciate it, and I appreciate your leadership in particular.
Thank you. Item 1081, this is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Item 1082, it is also a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It also moves to second reading. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for your hard work, and thank you also for the very compelling testimony. It's appreciated. Next item, 1083.
Amend a contract with Central City Concern to increase the not-to-exceed amount by $375,742 to provide additional treatment readiness services, transitional housing, and follow-up retention support services to chemically dependent, homeless adult chronic arrestees.
Thank you for being here.
Absolutely, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Is anyone working on the sound issue, the popping?
They were checking with Open City.
Okay, it's really tough
the
to
ticking or
listen
is it too
to.
loud?
It's ticking, the mics have seemed quite loud today, but
I
it's
turned
the,
the speakers off upstairs.
yeah, thank you, Carla.
Would you like to tell us about this item?
Absolutely. I'm Emily Rochan. I'm the Service Coordination Team Program Manager with the Portland Police Bureau, embedded within the Behavioral Health Unit. The proposed ordinance adjusts the current contract between the city and Central City Concern to match the increased already approved budget in this year's budget, 18-19. We entered the current contract in fiscal year 16-17 after an RFP process. The adopted budget and amendment will include increasing the number of supportive transitions and stabilization units from 6 units to 12, so increasing the number of clients that we're serving, which includes also increased staffing and client support services. The Supportive Transition and Stabilization Program is a portion of the service coordination team run by Central City Concern. The program is currently a 6-bed program, which allows the behavioral health unit and the behavioral health response teams, that's the officer clinician teams, to address those who they're working with that have perceived mental illness and also homeless, to address the housing first. So it's a direct resource for the behavioral health response teams to refer to the program, and then Central City Concern provides all the wraparound services for next steps, stabilization, connecting to treatment services, and then next steps to appropriate either transitional housing, permanent housing, and again, wraparound services. It also includes an inflation adjustment, since we've been in the contract since 2016-17. As we all know, cost of living has increased, housing has increased, just overall cost in the city has increased. So, and also the Oregon minimum wage is increasing, and Central City Concern is proactively adjusting current employee wages to ensure equitable wages for experience and longevity as well. And also, with the inflation of unit costs are increasing, and since we've been in contract with Central City Concern, the units that we paid for were actually below average than other Central City Concern units. So there's an adjustment there as well. And it's still actually below average of other single-room occupancy units throughout the city.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything, or?
I'm Melissa Bishop. I'm the Associate Director of Recovery Housing Programs, and I oversee the STS program. And I just want to say, since the beginning of this program, we have served 77 of our very most vulnerable folks on the street with mental health disorders. 28 of those people have exited into permanent housing and are still doing well today. That's a really big number when we're talking about this population. These are the people that we see over and over for years that are not getting services, and we have been able to bring them into our program and really make a difference. And so some of those people go into higher mental health programs, and exiting into permanent housing is really important for these folks. And so we're just really excited to do this work.
Thank you. Any questions?
I have a question. You mentioned about inflationary costs. Do we pay all of the staff at least $15 an hour?
No. The current, about a third of the employees there make under the $15.
So that's not in compliance with our policy, though, is it?
The Oregon minimum wage
No,
is...
the city's policy that anybody who's working full-time gets $15 an hour.
But they're not city employees,
But they're contract employees, and we passed that.
They actually have got bumped up. So all of our assistant case managers, they are the folks that work our 24-hour staffing, all have been bumped up in this new budget to $15 an hour. So everybody working at the Golden West right now with the HRR program, STS, are making $15 an hour.
Good, I'm glad to hear it. And I would encourage you in future to look at pay increases as well as inflationary increases, because these staff are doing incredibly difficult work, important work, and it's important. Sarah, could you not snap, please,
That's
because it's very
really
distracting.
disruptive.
Thank you. It's important for the clients to have continuity, and when people can't afford to live in Portland, for example, because they don't make very much money. So even though we may increase our investment, we may not then expand beds, but I, for one, will vote for that because I do want your staff to know how very important the work is, and I value it.
They're very valuable to us, too. Yes.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Is there public testimony on this item?
Yes, I show 5 people signed up. Sarah Hobbs, I believe it might be Philip Wolf, and Ida Pingala.
Philip may have left already.
Okay, we'll go with Maggie then. Also.
For the record, my name is Sarah Hobbs. So it just hit the news that 61% of all Portland arrests are due to the homeless, and 82% of these arrests are chronic arrests of the same people who are within the homeless community. The service coordination team's work is to reach those people who are most getting arrested. So as police commissioner, you're going to help yourself, Mayor, by approving this budget and getting those statistics down. BO, what frustrates me is we are constantly here at City Hall debating the service coordination team's budget when I personally feel it is the best program the Police Bureau has to minimize the criminalization of the homeless. So I'm appealing to you, actually, Mayor, in your position as police commissioner. But I'm sorry, it's not my goal to be distracting, Commissioner. You can tell how strongly I feel about this and want the attention brought to it. Forgive me for distracting you. Well, if you see it, tell me. Or if you could give me a thumbs up so I know I'm being heard, I'd appreciate it as well. But again, sorry for the distraction. This is an amazing but horribly underfunded program that will do great work toward the goal of decriminalization of the homeless. And it will get a lot of people off your back, Mayor, so I'm appealing to a little personal here, too. Thank you.
Thank you, and I enthusiastically agree with you, and this was a top priority for me in this last year's budget, and also moving it from one-time funding to permanent funding. And so I look forward to expanding it from here. And as you know, there are other service partners besides the Police Bureau, there's Central City, and others, and therefore, as we expand the program, we also have to think about the capacity that those programs have. But I enthusiastically agree with you.
Yeah, it's CCC's role at the SCT, but it's not just Central City concern.
That's correct.
But it's the group, it's
Right.
the service coordination team as a whole.
So I'm in complete agreement with you. Thank you, Commissioner Fritz.
Well, I think actually, didn't we also move it to cannabis tax money? So that's a much more dedicated funding stream. So
Well,
you don't need to keep coming back, because it's now, as the mayor said, in permanent funding with a solid revenue source.
Do I have a witness to what the commissioner just said?
It's all on the public record.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Thank you.
Maggie, do you want to go next?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to talk about the fact that I have a letter from my landlord when she upped the rent $250, and I was economically ousted out of my apartment after 8 years and kept all my rental receipts, and I've never been to jail or arrested, and I'm 54. So, if I end up on the street and I've been a victim of fair housing, and you've got these BID districts and these clean and safe people going around and taking people's stuff, and I end up on the street with everything I own in a bag, and you take my bag after I've been a victim of the fair housing laws, you're just criminalizing me for being poor. I want to say, after I started advocating against the conditions in Salvation Army, which you came and you called them ahead of time, and I know this because they were checking all their fire alarms and putting all their chairs in line
Maggie, are you going to
before
bring
you
this
came.
back to the
And
matter
did
at hand,
this
which is
and
Central City
this
concern?
let me finish what I'm saying, please, people can't go into the shelter if the shelter isn't safe. And if you go in and call them ahead of time before you come in and cover your eyes and ears, and you don't know what you're looking at and you don't know what's wrong unless people come and tell you, and unless you're willing to talk to those people, you're just criminalizing the poor.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'm Ida Pingala, and in relation to what Maggie just said.
Ida, can you make this relevant to the
Yes,
subject
I
at
am.
hand, which is the
Thank you.
contract with
Yes, I
Central
am.
City Concern?
The thing is, one thing about CCC, Central City Concern, is not only are they extremely corrupt, and they're a force in this community because they're here and they're everywhere, and they've got their little cleanup things. It looks like a lot of window dressing, and it is mostly window dressing. They're one of the biggest collections and companies of poverty pimping that's going on in this city, if not the state. They have certain rules, like a person has to be clean and sober to live there. Yeah, fine, except what if the person has never had a problem with drugs or alcohol, and let's say the person takes communion Sunday and it shows up as alcohol. Then they get kicked out, and then they're back down in there. Okay, CCC is not only corrupt, but a lot of the things that they're doing are not right. Okay, yes, they're opening up places for people that have low income, but you know what? It's being churned into the cycle. They're perpetuating the cycle of getting people in there and then getting them out, getting more people in there and then getting them out. It's not a very, shall we say, positive situation. Yes, they're there and they're there and they're obvious and they're helping people, but actually they're just keeping it at a level to where it's just the mill. It's grist for the lowest rungs of the mill, and I would like to see them be seriously accountable for what they're doing and why they're doing it and who they're allowing in and why they're not allowing other people in, and why they just aren't elevating the types of places they have. It's just terrible accommodations.
Thank you. Does that complete public
I
testimony?
know,
or
because
reserve?
I've
Charles
lived there,
Bridge Crane Johnson.
and I've dealt with CCC on many levels. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Charles Bridge Crane Johnson, and I'm not sure if at Central City the way they do it, but one way they could administer this sobriety testing at Central City Concern is they could make you say, Dr. Rachel Solotaroff, who's now the director, emeritus director. Blackburn has moved on. One thing that obviously this funding is critical, the most dramatic evidence that it's critical is the number of times you walk past Central City's building on Burnside and you see the people sleeping on the sidewalk outside. Probably also the same situation just a few blocks north at the Golden West. And when you approve this funding, it's also critical, and if you'd had a more open and engaging dialogue with these testifiers, they would tell you that they're only able to serve a select few, and the rest of them are left sleeping outside on the sidewalks in front of their buildings because we don't fund adequate emergency housing. Warehousing people isn't fun, it isn't pretty, but it's prettier than hypothermia. And also, it does give an element of stability. So talk to the Central City Concern workers and find out that, yes, this investment will help them move people into very limited housing resources. Some people will be saved if you just move them into mass shelters. Doesn't matter if it's Wapato or some other building that's got a U on it that can be made slightly safe. People are having relapses and staying in chronic substance abuse because it is the only way they can cope with being locked out of public buildings and sleeping on the sidewalk and urinating on the sidewalk and defecating in the parks because we don't give them adequate indoor structure. They don't all need this level of expenditure and care. Some of us do, but we also, with this, need to provide basic humanitarian indoor hygienic shelter. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further public testimony on this?
That's all who signed up.
Very good. So this is colleagues, any other questions? This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading, but in response to some of the testimony, I just want to read one set of facts. As you know, Central City provides the services that support the service coordination team's effort to decrease chronic arrests of homeless adults who are enrolled in the Bureau's Housing Rapid Response Program. The program is proven. There was based on data from 2017, there was an 82% reduction in post-program arrests for those who had graduated from the program. That is the point of this program, is to reduce interactions between the chronically homeless and the police, and to do that by providing whatever services people need to get off and stay off the streets, including drug addiction treatment. Is it too small? Yes, of course it is. The problem is much bigger than this solution individually can possibly address. But as I say, and Sarah certainly said, I am enthusiastically supportive of this. It moves to second reading. Next item is 1084.
Authorize application to the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, Bureau of Justice Assistance for a grant in the amount of $391,694 for the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program, fiscal year 2018 local solicitation to assist the Portland metropolitan area law enforcement and criminal justice community to prevent and reduce crime and violence.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. I'm here to provide some testimony on this and want to remind you that this is part of a public hearing of the governing body of the local government, City of Portland. And
Could you state your name for the record,
I
please?
beg
Sorry.
your pardon. My name is Bob Delgazy. I'm Business Operations Manager with Portland Police Bureau.
Thank you, Bob.
So as a public meeting, this is providing an opportunity for a review of what this application involves, and it provides citizens with an opportunity to comment on the application. And at the time of the accepting the award, the mayor will certify that this has taken place. The Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistant Grant for 2018 was submitted, the application was submitted to the United States Department of Justice on the 22nd of August, 2018. The 2018 solicitation still requires a minimum 30-day review by the governing body, as I just mentioned. Although the Office of Justice Programs has decreased the application window from 6 to 4 weeks this year. So upon advice from City Attorney, the Bureau has proceeded with the application ordinance to fulfill the review requirement. The grant program instituted by Department of Justice in 2005 is named after Edward Eddie R. Byrne, a New York City police officer who was killed while on duty in 1988. The Department of Justice directs funding of local law enforcement agencies to assist in their efforts to prevent or reduce crime and violence. The 2018 JAG funds will be made under disparate certification to the City of Portland, Multnomah County, and the City of Gresham. The solicitation requires the city to submit a joint application for the disparate municipalities and to also act as the fiscal agent for the grant. The formula award amount is allocated to the 3 entities based on a statutory formula provided by the Bureau of Justice Statistics. The Police Bureau will receive $189,585, Multnomah County $148,960, and Gresham Police Department $53,149, for a total of $391,694 in federal funding. Although the federal grant award period is 4 years, per federal statute, local agencies spend their awards within 2 years. The Police Bureau will utilize their JAG funding for the following items. It will support the first year of a 3-year bicycle registration program designed by the Bureau's Bicycle Theft Task Force. This is modeled on the successful Vancouver, British Columbia program. Grant funding will provide for personnel and event expenses for participation in bicycle events to encourage on-the-spot registration and for registration kits for low-income community members. Bike thieves target about 10,000 bicycles each year, and this equates to $10 million worth of property loss for the community. If a bicycle is not registered, there's less than a 10% chance that it will be returned to its owner. The second project is a digital exchange known as a hub for sharing police records data. The hub will be separate from the records management system, and it's designed for easy integration with any RMS any agency may choose. Multnomah County will fund a portion of the personnel expense for the North Neighborhood Deputy District Attorney position. The Gresham Police Department is asking for grant funds for their education program titled Every 15 Minutes, which is designed to dramatically instill teenagers with the potentially dangerous consequences of drinking alcohol and texting while driving, which is distracted or impaired driving. The Department of Justice has stated that the JAG 2018 awards will be awarded after the 30th of September 2018. Do you have any questions?
Commissioner Fritz.
Did we actually get the money this year?
The award has not been announced yet.
From last year?
We just received the award notification for the 2017, and I think that was on the 11th of this month.
So we are going to be getting the usual money that we usually get?
We did receive the award for the 2017 grant, albeit later than expected.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Is there any public testimony on this item?
Yes, we have 3 people signed up. Maggie Catherine Baker, and Nancy Newell.
This is about, you talking, oh, you go ahead first. Okay, you wanted to talk about theft and crime reduction. Well, I've been Memphis. To be Memphis is when you advocate for something
I'm sorry,
like.
because we're running late, I have to really make sure that we are focused on the issue at hand. The testimony has to be directly related to the topic at hand.
Okay.
It is the JAG grant for the
Are you
three
judge and
specific-
jury on that,
Yes, I am.
Mayor?
Yes, I am.
I don't think so.
Yes, I am. I am the presiding officer, and it is
I'm
my job to keep the
speaking
meeting.
about
You're
this
taking
right
the freedom
here.
of speech away from
I'm
public
not.
citizens and
I
public
am not.
testimony. Yes, you are.
I am not. Council rules dictate.
We'll
that
meet
it-
you in court.
Time, place, and
problem.
manner.
Okay, great. I'll see you in
So
court.
a
Testimony. How did I
judge
interrupt?
has decided that it's unconstitutional for Metro to be IDing people
Has
on the
nothing
max.
to do with the JAG grant. Either get it to the JAG grant, or I'm going to move on to the next individual. Thank you. You're up.
Okay, time starts. You reduced it to 2 minutes, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so are you having fun? Okay, so our water situation is causing the very problem that
No,
you're
no, no,
trying
no.
to deal with.
Nope, this is about-
Excuse me, Mayor Wheeler.
Take a recess.
Our water situation.
project at hand.
That was all who had signed
Very
up.
good. This is a first, I'm sorry, did anybody have any questions about? This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Next, item 1085.
Amend inclusionary housing code to make technical corrections to the floor area ratio requirement for a tax exemption as designated in the zoning code.
Director Callahan, welcome back. Matt, good to see you.
Mayor and Commissioners. We are here to bring a minor technical correction to the inclusionary housing program. As you know, we are constantly examining this program and making sure that we have it correctly calibrated. And we are bringing a minor amendment to the program which deals with the base FAR and the ability to get a full tax exemption. With that, I'm going to turn it briefly over to Assistant Director Matthew Shabold to walk you through a couple of the finer points of the changes.
So given the time, I'm just going to focus on this slide, and the original calibration of the inclusionary requirement with the incentives focused when construction reached 5-to-1 FAR or above, given that it would most likely trigger a higher cost of construction, the full property tax exemption on all residential improvements in a building was offered. The way we wrote the code at the time was that if the base zone was 5-to-1 or greater, that the project would be eligible for the full tax exemption. What we have learned from feedback from industry stakeholders since the adoption is that there are a number of locations in the central city, and you see a map of the FAR there on the screen, where the base FAR may be below 5-to-1, but with transfers or bonuses, the developer is able to actually construct a project above 5-to-1 FAR. So we're making a change to the language in our tax exemption code in order to stay true to the original policy nexus of the program calibration, and that if a development is at 5-to-1 or greater, that with this change, they would be able to receive the full property tax exemption.
Director Callahan, you know, I've done a number of brown bag lunches recently with law firms for the purpose of advocating for some ballot measures.
Mm-hmm.
And in the course of those meetings, when the conversation opens up to broader city issues, I've often been asked about the city's inclusionary housing policy and whether we're going to make some adjustments so that it works better. And it occurs to me that, and the answer I always give is, yes, we are listening to our key stakeholders, and we will be making adjustments as we go along. My question to you is, how do we do a better job of making sure that the development community understands the fine-tuning that we are doing, like today? I noticed there's nothing in the materials before council that has any letters of support from the development community, and I'm likely to get the same question at the next brown bag. What are you doing on inclusionary housing? Is it working? And how are you working with the folks that are investing in housing? So what can we do to make sure that there's better communication with some of our key stakeholders?
Well, thank you, Commissioner, for the question. We just have released an 18-month review of inclusionary housing, which also talks about the next steps for refinements that the city is considering. We have sent that out broadly through the development community and with some of our partners, for instance, at I believe Smart Growth America, formerly known as Locus, and I think actually you will hear from Gwen Baldwin in a few moments to talk about this policy in particular, but making sure that we are regularly communicating about next steps is going to be important. We have just taken over the responsibility of reporting on inclusionary housing from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and want to increase our efforts to communicate with developers in the private market. Just to give you a quick example of what you have seen in the 18-month report, this is a map actually of where all the inclusionary housing units are located in the city with the little white building icons, and then the black arrows are actually where there are early assistance permit. So some of these units are actually in the permit process, and some of these units are coming on. Not to say that our early success doesn't mean we're going to continue to recalibrate and look at this program. As I said at the outset, Commissioner, we all knew this was not a static program. It needs to be responsive to what's happening with current market conditions.
So the other piece of that I would urge you to consider is, again, in the course of some work I've done recently in briefing editorial boards on some ballot measures, I also was struck by some of the persistent critiques that linger, and along the lines of the success of this program, the extent to which we're developer friendly in our in how we interact with people through the Bureau of Development Services and things like that. So if you do have reports and updates of this stuff, I would urge you to also consider sending them along to the editorial boards to keep people with cover notes, because it's an ongoing job of educating people about the process we're engaged in. Doesn't mean they're going to necessarily give us any credit for the work, but I think there's a big gap in terms of understanding the amount of outreach we're doing and the fine-tuning we're doing. I think that's useful information that we ought to share with more people.
Thank you, Commissioner. A very helpful suggestion.
Were those unit numbers you just showed affordable units, or those are the total units associated with those
It's the
permits?
total number of projects and total units. We're
Okay.
seeing the number of inclusionary units sit at about 15% of the total units.
So there's 362 inclusionary units, meaning units that'll be affordable to households making 80% or 60% of median income, but they represent a larger number of actual units that are coming online fully in the market. So we show you both to make sure that you have an understanding of how many buildings and what's actually happening in the development community overall.
Thank you.
Does that complete your presentation?
It does, Mayor.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Is there public testimony on this item, Carla?
Yes, I show two people,
Very good.
Maggie and Gwen Baldwin.
Very good. Come on up.
Let's just make sure this is about tax exclusion for nonprofits, quote-unquote nonprofits, right, for their
No.
buildings?
No.
No, what is this one about again? I was in the bathroom.
These are technical corrections to the inclusionary housing code.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to hear,
Mandated
do you want to
number.
hear what Gwen says, and maybe that'll help?
Yeah, go ahead.
Very good. Go ahead, Gwen. Thank you.
Thank you. Gwen Baldwin here today representing Oregon Smart Growth as Director Callahan. Congratulations. Noted earlier, we were formerly known as Oregon Locust. We are a coalition of developers, investors, and allied professions who are committed to livable, walkable communities. And that means making the most of each opportunity to bring units forward that are in high opportunity areas like Central City. And in this particular case, I definitely want to give credit to the Housing Bureau for hearing the feedback we had and the concerns, where if you get to that threshold point where you have to build a more expensive type of form, a high-rise or a podium that uses a lot more steel, it's a more expensive form. And often you can get to that with the 3-to-1 bonus that is a part of inclusionary housing at much lower base FARs. And so it's really important to make the most of each opportunity. This I will note, does not change the heights that are on each of these properties, but it simply allows the full offset package to be available in these more expensive forms.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
Okay, so is this the inclusionary housing where the government found that they weren't meeting their...
No, ma'am, it isn't. It isn't. It's a mandate that requires a certain set aside of affordable units in private market development in exchange for some incentives.
And
Used to be
they...
preempted by the legislature, and we lifted the preemption. The city now has implemented it, and it's a mandate in private sector development.
Okay, and they didn't meet their quota? In other words, they didn't get the
No,
number
it has
of...
nothing to do with quotas. It has to do with fine-tuning the specific requirements of the program.
Okay. I don't think they met their quota of low-income housing that they were supposed to offer up.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Any further questions? Gwen, thank you. Please call the roll.
Udaly?
Well, thanks for bringing this item forward, and I'm excited to see the numbers starting to come through. As we know, there was a mad rush to get permits in before we implemented our inclusionary housing rules, and a lot of developers have told us that it's not penciling out, but apparently some of them have figured out how to make it pencil out. So I vote aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you, everybody, for your good work on that. Carla, could you read 1087 and 1088 together, please?
1087, approve application under the Multiple Unit Limited Tax Exemption Program under the Inclusionary Housing Program for 26 and Upshur Apartments located at 2590 Northwest Upshur Street. And 1088, approve application under the Multiple Unit Limited Tax Exemption Program under the Inclusionary Housing Program for Nehalem Apartments located at 1645 Southeast Nehalem Street.
Colleagues, these projects will join 37 other private sector projects in the inclusionary housing permit approval pipeline, totaling a minimum of 342 affordable housing units, in other words, market rate developments. Together, these apartment buildings will provide 208 units of new housing combined, 60 of which will be affordable for 99 years to households earning up to 80% of median family income as part of the inclusionary housing program. 26th and Upshur will restrict 22 of its 145 total units at 80% MFI. Nehalem Apartments will restrict 9 of its 63 units at 80%, an additional 29 units at 60% MFI for 2 other IH subject projects in development at 5955 Southeast Milwaukee and 1717 Southeast Tenino. Urban Development Group, UDG, is the owner and developer on both of these projects. In total, this ownership group has 7 IH projects, 6 of which were vested under the inclusionary zoning, voluntarily opting into the program in order to access the incentive package available through inclusionary housing, reducing obligations on the developer. The multi-unit limited tax exemption or multi-program is one of the financial incentives provided to inclusionary housing projects that make units affordable rather than paying a fee in lieu. Each multi-application, as you know, comes before the City Council approval. In addition to the 10-year tax exemption provided by the multi, these projects will receive an exemption of the affordable housing construction excise tax and system development charges that otherwise would have been due on the affordable units. Director Callahan, welcome back.
Good afternoon, Mayor. Dory Van Bockel, the Development Team Incentives Manager, and I are just here to answer any questions you have about these projects before you today.
Colleagues, any further questions on these items?
Is Urban Development Group one of the first that stepped forward with a development around Mount Tabor? Is that, am I thinking of the same company? Or
Most of these projects are in the Selwood area.
right?
I'm not sure if they've had any quite around the Tabor area, Mount Tabor area.
The primary owner of these, this firm is actually Dennis Sackhoff, Commissioner, who you met with during the inclusionary housing development process, but he has been utilizing this product in a variety of different places throughout the city, yes.
That's good to hear.
Is there any public testimony on either of these items?
Yes. Maggie has signed up.
Thank you. Maggie, did you want to testify or no?
Okay, it was either the Portland Tribune or the Oregonian that reported that these developers were not meeting their quota of inclusionary housing, and it was also coming from Salem that was saying they were not meeting their quotas for inclusionary housing. So as far as like giving developers a break on taxes or giving them money, maybe these programs need to be monitored more closely, and maybe we need to have Like, why 80% MFI? Why not 60%?
Because the state legislature only authorized that, ma'am. And
Okay.
you're mixing and matching things that have they're totally unrelated. There has been no report of developers not meeting their goals. There was a report.
Aren't you the Parks and Recs guy?
Former housing commissioner, ma'am, but you're tying up our time with misinformation.
Okay, you are the Parks and Recs guy, though, right? Right now?
And you have an obligation to say something factual when you
Okay,
come
but you
before
are
us.
the Parks and Recs guy, are you not?
I'll let you finish.
Are you the commissioner for Parks and Rec?
Just let her finish. She has
Recreation?
one more minute.
Am I right? You're the commissioner for Parks and Recreation, correct? Is he?
He
Okay.
is, but it's not germane to this discussion.
Right, but, I just want to correctly identify who is talking, and he's not talking, he's not the Commissioner of Housing. Okay, so I want to talk about inclusionary housing that's actually inclusionary and not just for people who maybe are at the edges of the market rate. And, giving these developers sweetheart deals doesn't increase housing for low-income people. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Please call the roll on item 1087.
Udaly?
Well, we have one of the nation's most stringent mandatory inclusionary zoning ordinances, and I am happy to see these proposals and developments coming forward. I vote aye.
Fritz?
I noticed that almost everything on today's agenda has been about providing housing and services for people who need them, and I appreciate this multifaceted efforts. Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Yeah, very encouraged to see these new developments stepping forward and taking advantage of our inclusionary housing program. It's great to see. Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. 1088, please call the roll.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you, everyone. Last item is the second reading, 1089. I'm sorry, second to the last item,
Last, yeah.
1089.
Authorize intergovernmental agreements and grant agreements in support of the Lead Hazard Reduction Program for 5 years, beginning fiscal year 2019-2020, in an amount up to $425,000 per year, and increase the annual not to exceed authorized amount for fiscal year 2018-19 to $395,000.
Colleagues, this is a second reading. There's already been a presentation and public testimony. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Thanks to Scott Bradway, the Program Manager of the Water Bureau's Water Quality Division. I thought it was an excellent presentation last week, and I'm excited about the advances in prevention of problems associated with lead in fixtures. Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. 1079 was pulled by Mr. Walsh. Is that correct?
Yes.
He is no longer here. Please read the item and call the roll.
Authorize intergovernmental agreement with Oregon Department of Transportation for the Central Systemic Signal and Bike Ped Elimination Project in the amount of $1,859,554.
Please call the roll.
Sorry. Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. We are adjourned.